Hi and welcome back. So we're going to finish up with Chapter 8. So we've talked about channel strategy, and we've talked about multi-tier channel strategy. So that's um, using multiple middlemen or intermediaries to get our product from us to the ultimate consumer. And then we've talked about direct distribution, where we don't use any intermediaries and we sell directly to our ultimate consumer. And now we're going to talk about multi-channel rather than multi-tier distribution. We're going to talk about multi-channel distribution. So this is the use of two or more channels to reach our consumers. And this has become pretty common in today's world. It was less common, say, 20, 30 years ago, but the advent of the internet and other ways to establish channels has made multi-channel distribution the most common type of distribution, at least for consumer products and even for business-to-business products. So many companies use multi-channel distribution, and they do that because it works for them. So let's talk about what multi-channel distribution is and what the positives and negatives of multi-channel distribution is. So basically, the definition is two or more channels. So when would we decide to use multi-channel distribution? Well, if these are sort of just examples of multiple channels. So I produce my own brand that I sell, let's say, to retailers, resellers, and then I also make a private store brand with the retailer's name on it. So that's multi-channels. I'm a producer of whatever it is, let's say peanut butter. I sell my product under my Skippy peanut butter name, my own brand, and I also produce peanut butter for supermarkets, so for Walmart or for Hannaford or something. So I'm going to produce for two different markets using different names, and I've got different distribution channels. So that's that's number one. Maybe I sell my product directly to large customers, let's say large volume retailers, but I have a multi-tier channel when I sell to small volume retailers. This is quite common. A company may choose to distribute directly to, let's say, the Targets and Walmarts and Home Depots of the world, the large companies that maintain their own distribution network and have their own warehouses, so I can ship my product direct to them in an efficient manner, but then I may sell to small volume retailers using a channel, a wholesale channel, to get to the small volume retailers. So two different structures for two different kinds of retail customers, and then obviously the large volume retailers and the small volume retailers both sell my product to the ultimate consumer. And sometimes we choose multi-channel distribution where we use a direct sales force in bigger markets, and then we may use brokers or agents in smaller markets. We're able to efficiently have our in-house sales force sell in the larger markets, but it's not efficient to have them sell in the smaller markets. So I might have use my own sales force in Massachusetts and use an agent in Maine. Smaller market, too expensive to travel my own salesperson in Maine, so I may use an agent who's selling my product and other products at the same time. How I set up a multi-channel system has a lot to do with the relative channel strength of the manufacturers and the middlemen. I've said retailers here, but it could be also wholesalers. If I'm a manufacturer and I decide to start a direct distribution channel in a territory where I also have a intermediary that can be a problem. My intermediary is not going to be very happy to be selling my product and then have me selling right next to them direct, because I'm impinging on their market, and I have advantages if I'm selling direct. First of all, I'm the manufacturer, so I know more about the product, and maybe I have deeper pockets. I can be more competitive than the retailer may be able to be, or the wholesaler may be able to be. So how do retailers or wholesalers react to this kind of thing? So I can talk about this from my own experience, because this happened to me many times as a retailer in the sports industry. I had suppliers who chose to compete with me directly by opening their own stores in markets where I had stores. And they chose to compete directly by selling their product direct to the consumer on the internet in my marketplace. So in both those cases, that was a difficult situation for me. So what are my options as a retailer? Well, my options are I can stop carrying that firm's product. So I can vote with my pocketbook and say, hey, you want to sell direct? Go for it. I'm not going to carry your product anymore. I'm going to switch to some other similar product. Put my dollars with suppliers that are supporting me. So that's one thing to do. But that may not work if the brand that's doing that is very important to me as a retailer or a wholesaler. It may not benefit me to drop the brand. It may be too expensive for me to drop the brand. So I may keep the brand, but I probably will de-emphasize the brand. I'll probably reduce the push that I give to that brand. So I'm going to try to sell the product because it's a necessary product for me to have. The consumers expect me to have it, but I'm not going to focus on it, and I'm not going to put as much effort behind that product. I'm going to reposition my effort to products where I'm getting support from the manufacturer as opposed to competition from the manufacturer. So if that's the retailer's viewpoint, how does the manufacturer deal with that? If the manufacturer is concerned about that, if the retailer's volume is important to him, he may not dare to sell against the retailer. He doesn't want that retailer to drop him. He needs that retailer. Certainly doesn't want to be de-emphasized in the retailer. So there's a push and shove. There's a give and take here. The manufacturer wants to do something because they see it as beneficial to them, but if it hurts their channel members, then it may not be a win-win. It may be a win-lose. So if the retailer or wholesaler has got lots of volume, then the manufacturer will be negatively impacted if the retailer decides to stop carrying the product. So as an example, one of the early multi-channel distributors in the products that I sold was the company called Patagonia. Some of you may be familiar with Patagonia. And Patagonia was a multi-channel distribution, had a multi-channel distribution model even before the internet. So they had wholesale dealers, of which I was one. I was a retailer, so I was from their standpoint, they were selling to me at wholesale. And then they had a catalog where they sold direct mail order, which morphed into selling direct on the internet over time. And then they also had their own stores. And since I was located in a large market, one of the first markets they entered with their own stores was the Boston market, where I was located. So my reaction to Patagonia was, this is really difficult for me. They're an important product. My customers like their product and expect to be able to buy their product from me. But at the same time, within a few miles of some of my stores, and less than a few miles, a few city blocks of some of my stores, here was my supplier selling against me, selling their own product in their own store, and doing it in a pretty aggressive manner. Though they tried to keep that very quiet, they did a lot of price competition as well as selection competition. So this was difficult, and they were also doing it either mail order or online. So this really affected my relationship with Patagonia, because even though their product sold and I made money selling their product, I didn't see any future in it for my business. So was always looking for a way to de-emphasize, if you will, their product. Did that harm Patagonia? Well, that would be for you to ask them. From my standpoint, I was trying to develop other brands that I could sell in lieu of Patagonia, because I had this issue with them, this channel distribution issue. So that kind of stuff happens, and as a manufacturer, you have to decide what's going to work and what's not. So companies decide to use direct marketing because they can get incremental revenue from it. So I'm a manufacturer, I'm selling to retailers, and if I start selling online through my own channels, all of a sudden I've got more revenue. So that's good. Sometimes direct marketing leverages the presence of the traditional channel. So I've got the bricks and mortar channel there, and now people are used to my brand and they'll buy it online. So there's the symbiosis between the two channels, if you will. And sometimes buyers just want that convenience of buying online, let's say, or buying in a company store, buying in a single brand store. So it can maybe satisfy some buyer requirements. So there's some advantages to going to direct marketing, and those are some of them there. Same thing whether I'm using direct marketing in a traditional sense by opening my own stores, or if I'm using electronic channels. A lot of people argue that electronic marketing doesn't cannibalize from traditional intermediaries. Others argue that it does. I would come down on the side that it does cannibalize sales from traditional intermediaries. But the manufacturers that I dealt with always said, "Oh no, this is gonna increase the brand awareness and it's gonna help your sales. It's not gonna hurt your sales." I never bought into that, but they certainly had a right to say that. There's a strong argument that electronic marketing channels or digital marketing channels meet different market segments. So some people can't shop in stores. Some people live in rural areas or places that are difficult to get to stores, so they find electronic marketing more convenient. So there are arguments on both sides that it reinforces your traditional channels, or that it reaches markets that don't, or that it generates incremental revenue. All of those are valid reasons for using multi-channels, including electronic marketing channels. So that's kind of where we're at there. Here's a huge word: disintermediation. Disintermediation is getting fired, essentially. When we take a multi-channel system, a multi-tier channel, and we fire one of the channel members. We decide we're not going to use retailers anymore, we're going to go direct. Or we decide we're not going to use wholesalers anymore, we're going to go direct to the retailers. So a traditional intermediary channel member is dropped from a marketing channel. That's what we call disintermediation. And it's basically we got fired. We don't want you as a wholesaler anymore because we don't need you as a wholesaler anymore. We're going to sell direct. And I've been in that place too for long ago when I first started in business. My first business was actually a wholesale business in the firearms and fishing tackle business, and I was a distributor of most of the major brands of firearms and ammunition and fishing tackle, and sold my product as a wholesaler to independent retailers in New England and New York. So 7-state region was my territory, and I traveled salespeople and called on independent hunting and fishing retailers. And at the time, they were the dominant players in that market. But as I was doing this, the market was changing. There were big box stores that were suddenly taking market share from the independents. And the manufacturers figured out that they could sell direct to these big box stores and cut out or disintermediate the wholesale channel. So they didn't need me to sell to, at the time it was pre-Walmart, it was Kmart, was the first big one, actually. And before that, there were some regional ones that you never would have heard of. So big box stores that were able to be sold direct by the manufacturers as opposed to having wholesalers deal with them. So the big box stores got pulled out of my territory, even though they were selling product in my territory. And of course, they were also successful, so they were stealing market share from my independent retailers, and the independent retailers were closing. So I had the market that I was serving was shrinking, and the market that was growing I was excluded from by my manufacturers, by my channel partners. So that's kind of what happened in that marketplace, and I worked really hard to figure out ways out of that, and sometime maybe I'll tell you about that. But that was a disintermediation. The manufacturers found a better way to distribute product, and they didn't need wholesalers anymore. They didn't need that intermediate channel. They could go direct to the retailer rather than going through a wholesaler. So if I'm selling to intermediaries, I have to keep them happy. They are my customers. Even though my ultimate customer is the consumer of the product, the intermediaries are who I actually sell goods to and who actually pay me. And those intermediaries are free agents. They can choose who they want to deal with. They don't have to buy my product as a manufacturer. They can buy somebody else's product. They don't have to distribute my product and or retail my product. They can choose who they want to deal with. So they choose who they want to deal with, and they also have a lot of power in terms of deciding how much effort they're going to put into your product as the manufacturer, because they're selling your product and they're selling other products as well. So first of all, they choose who they want to deal with. They want to make sure that whoever they deal with has good offerings, so the products are good and fit their target market. So the wholesaler or the retailer has a target market, and they want to have products that fit their target market. And they often seek support from their manufacturers. So wholesalers may not look for advertising, but they want promotional assistance, and we'll talk about what that means. And industrial distributors want technical assistance. And retailers probably want communication assistance. So intermediaries choose who they want to deal with, and one of the ways they choose is by how much help am I going to get from my channel partner here, my manufacturer, in order to be successful. So when we talk about technical assistance for industrial distributors, many graduates of Maine Maritime end up as sales engineers, so-called, and sales engineers are technical assistance people. So big machinery and equipment producers sell their product, and they usually have wholesalers selling their product. The wholesalers don't have as much technical prowess as the manufacturers themselves. So the manufacturers provide sales engineers to go on sales calls with their wholesale customers. So the wholesaler who's selling to industrial, the industrial distributor actually, who's selling to whatever, let's say if we're talking marine business, so they're selling to a ship owner. They're going to call on that ship owner and pitch a new engine or repower for, say, a tugboat. And let's say they are the Caterpillar distributor. They're going to bring a sales engineer from Caterpillar to explain all of the details of the engine and why it's the best thing since sliced bread, because the wholesaler's salesperson doesn't have as much technical knowledge as the manufacturer's sales engineer. So industrial distributors expect that help from their manufacturer, and so forth. So intermediaries, we can help intermediaries, make them successful, and if they're successful, we're successful. We can provide them with discounts, so improve their margins by providing additional discounts. Fill rate standards. If wholesalers are stocking our product, they want to get, when they order it, they want to get 100% of what they order. So we can track fill rates, and fill rates are how much of an order do I fill. So if if I'm ordering product from my manufacturer and they ship 80% of what I order and back order 20%, that's an 80% fill rate. If they ship 90% and back order 10%, that's a 90% fill rate. When you're an intermediary, having a manufacturer with high fill rates makes you more profitable. So you want high fill rates. Co-op advertising, often used with retailers, so the manufacturer actually pays for a significant portion of the advertising that a retailer does. If you get flyers from your local supermarket, those flyers are not costing the supermarket anything. They're actually profit centers because they produce the flyer, but they charge, or the manufacturers that are featured in the flyer, the Lay's potato chips and the Heinz ketchups and whatever else, they're actually paying to be in that flyer. They're providing advertising support for the retailer. It benefits both manufacturer and retailer, and retailers look for that. Shorter lead times, your intermediaries like to be able to order and get quickly, so have short lead times. Intermediaries love exclusivity, so if you don't allow anybody else to sell in their territory, that makes them more profitable, and they love that. So if you provide that, that's a good thing. But of course, if you provide exclusivity, that means you're just dealing with one player in a particular market. You might want to deal with more. And obviously, enabling the intermediary to make money, to have a fair profit margin. So channel conflict happens all the time. Each member of the channel has their own self-interest. The self-interest may not all work for everybody's benefit. So channel conflict, a channel member bypasses another member to sell or buy direct. Give you another example from my past. In one of the companies I ran had sold boats, sailboats, and we were a very large dealer for J-boats, which are at the time were production sailboats in the 20 to 35 foot range. And many of these boats got sold as group deals because yacht clubs would buy, or members of yacht clubs would buy 5 or 6 or 10 boats all the same to conduct local racing. And at a particular time of downturn in the market, in the sailing market, my sales manager had spent a long time, and I'd paid an awful lot of bar bills, to convince a yacht club that they should buy a specific boat that I was selling, and they were ready to place an order for 10 of these, and these were $40,000-$50,000 boats, so that was a $500,000 order, significant order. And my manufacturer went around us and sold those boats direct to the yacht club. And guess what? This channel member was pretty upset. We ended up dropping that product line fairly shortly thereafter. It was really terrible because we'd worked for 2 years to generate this order, and then the manufacturer came around us and sold the boats direct. So it was a tough time in the marketplace. They had a lot of production, excess production. They had boats that they owned that they wanted to sell, and they basically stole the sale from us. So that's a channel conflict. You can have disputes about profit margins. Manufacturers often think that wholesalers and or retailers are not providing enough support for the products. They're emphasizing other products and not the products that they're buying from me if I'm the manufacturer. And then dual distribution, where you've got distribution in competing retailers and or wholesalers. That's always a place of channel conflict. How come you're selling your product to them? I'm your customer. All of a sudden now you're selling the guy down the street the same stuff. Now he's competing on price and my margins have gone to hell and I'm not happy with you. So that's a channel conflict issue. Because these are informal power chains, oftentimes channels have a channel captain. It's not necessarily the producer. It's the member of the channel who has the most market power. And if that member chooses, they can police the channel to reduce the number of conflicts, or to resolve conflicts as well. So channel captains exist. So channel captains are often the manufacturer or the producer itself, because they have a lot of power usually, but not always. Sometimes you have a member of the channel who has a tremendous amount of market power, like say a Walmart in a channel often has a lot more market power than the producers they're buying from. So they may be channel captains. And channel captains can be positive for the whole channel, or they can just be out for themselves. And that depends on how the channel captain perceives their best interest. So when you're making decisions about channels that already exist, modifying channels, you're trying to provide the best market coverage. That's the purpose of the channel. You want to satisfy your target market and what they need, and you want to maximize your own revenue and minimize your own costs. So those are the reasons that you have a channel, and they're also the reasons you may decide to modify your channel. So if I'm going to modify my channel, is the channel, if I change the channel, will it improve my coverage of my target market? So will my consumer get their product in a better way? Will their needs be satisfied? And how is that going to happen? Am I going to have to absorb some additional marketing functions? And if so, which ones, and how much are they going to cost? How is it going to change the other channel members, the ones I'm not modifying? What's it going to do to my other channel members? And will it let me meet my objectives? So you don't go about changing your channel situation lightly, because it's extremely key part of, or integral part of, what you're doing in a marketing sense. And you definitely have to think about what's the financial impact. If we eliminate wholesalers, we have to assume the cost of everything they do for us. So there's some costs there. They're selling to retailers, so they're traveling salespeople, they're calling on retail accounts, and they're making sales. If they aren't doing that, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have a sales force. I'm going to have to administer that sales force. Right now, I produce goods and I ship them to my wholesalers. I don't have to pay and carry that inventory that's necessary to serve the retailers. All of a sudden now I have to hold the inventory instead of my wholesalers holding the inventory. When I'm holding inventory, I have to store it, and then of course I have to ship it, deliver it. So instead of shipping large quantities, I'm going to ship small quantities, because I could ship large quantities to my wholesalers. Now I'm going to have to ship small quantities. And I'm going to have to pay to carry their accounts receivable, because they provide credit to the retailers. Now I'm going to have to provide credit to the retailers. So that's a cost as well. So this is just a simple chart. It's way more complicated than this in reality, but let's look at a simple chart. I have wholesalers, and right now when I sell goods to the wholesalers, I sell that at a lower price than then they resell to retailers, and I give up margin to my wholesalers that's the equivalent of $5 million. And I still have to service the wholesalers, and that costs me $500,000. So the total cost of going through wholesalers is $5.5 million. If I eliminate the wholesalers, go direct to retailers, I'm going to need a sales force. And I estimate that sales force will cost me $1.5 million. I have to have people to administer or manage the sales force. That's $250,000. I'm now going to have to pick up the inventory that my wholesalers were carrying, and the carrying cost of that inventory is $935,000. So that's whatever the X% of the amount of inventory I have is what it costs to carry it. I have to deliver it and store it, and that's $1.877 million. And the cost of carrying the receivables from my retailers I estimate to be $438,000. So my total cost by doing it myself, as opposed to using wholesalers, is $5 million instead of $5.5 million. So I'm not going to eliminate $5.5 million of costs by getting rid of my wholesalers. I'm going to eliminate $500,000 of cost, 5.5 to 5, because I have to do everything the wholesalers were doing, and by doing that I'm going to eat up much of what I'm saving. So which alternative should be selected? Well, it's cheaper to do it direct as opposed to using wholesalers. So the economic decision is there, but there may be other reasons that I might want to keep the wholesalers. They may have really good relationships with the retailers, and I don't. I'm going to have new salespeople that don't know the territory, don't know the retail buyers, don't know how to get in the door, and that's going to be a problem for me. So that there may be some risks beyond the savings. So I might have savings, but I'm taking on additional risks. So that's kind of your decisions, the quantitative part of it, but there's still a qualitative part, which is going to be better for me. Logistics is a big part of choosing wholesale, so we want to look at logistics cost and service, and these are the pieces that add costs. So storage costs, processing and fulfillment costs, inventory costs, and transportation costs. So that fits into this too. Are the wholesalers going to getting rid of wholesalers, will it improve my service or hurt my service? And this is the pieces that go into that. And finally, your marketing plan has to contain a logistics strategy. It shouldn't be very detailed because this is not a logistics plan, it's a marketing plan, but logistics is a key function. So what's our costs and how responsive do we need to be? And if we set it up this way, we won't be as responsive. We'll save money. If we set it up that way, it'll cost more, but we'll be more responsive. And figuring out how logistics is going to support your other marketing decisions. So that wraps up Chapter 8. There's some questions after this, and you have your case study due at the end of the week. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and then we'll have a discussion next week. Thanks. Bye.